In this session, let's talk a little bit about the enterprise risk management, which is becoming one of the buzzwords in the today's financial markets as well as in the non-financial industry. What is this enterprise risk management all about? How is it different from the typical risk management approaches that have been followed in the various organizations till date? That is what we are typically going to take up in this session. Just as a quick introduction, every company, no matter what business it is into, it has to develop effective processes for different kinds of risks. Nothing questioned in that. Right? Every risk, it could be a market risk, it could be a credit risk, it could be an operations risk, it could be a strategic risk, whatever is the kind of risk. To address each of those significant risks the company is facing, it has to come out with effective processes to mitigate them, to handle them, but what we are simply saying is not in isolation. There can be a lot of interdependencies between each of the risks. I can't segregate exactly what is a market risk and a credit risk. There could be some level of overlap between these. That is where the real danger comes up when we are trying to, one, categorize the risk saying that this is a market risk. Now what happens is when I try to categorize it, I will assign a manager to it to handle it. So the manager who is handling it, he tries to look at it purely from a market risk perspective. But there could be an element of credit risk inside it, which means the reality is saying that the various risks that the company is facing, they are not isolated from each other. They have lot of interdependencies, and that is where the enterprise risk management is coming into picture. I should look at mechanisms of reducing the risk, but not in isolation. The moment I start looking at the risks in isolation by giving a separate name to it, we see that the entire process becomes inefficient. We develop a silo based approach, individualized, isolated kind of an approach, which comes out to be inefficient, and in today's world it can even become dangerous to the firm. That is what is enterprise risk management targeting. I should be able to do the management of my risks effectively. I need to identify all my risks, come out with mechanisms in terms of handling each of these risks, but at the same time not look at them in isolation, because what we really see is the risks are heavily dynamic. They keep changing. At one point I may see that this particular risk does not exist or it has a very small impact, but within no time that itself could lead to a drastic loss. So we need to constantly monitor the risk, not just in isolation, but also understand the interdependency that is present between the risks. And that is where the ERM suggests look at the integrated approach to manage the risk. Sometimes it is even called as a portfolio approach to manage the risk. Right? Don't look at them as silos. That is what is the simple point ERM is talking about. Because in the real world, even today, yes, lot of things have come into the market to measure. You have a lot of tools to measure different kinds of risk. You have a lot of tools to identify different kinds of risk. But in isolation, yes, for marketers, there's a lot of information available, lot of tools available. Credit risk, yes. Operations risk, yes. Even today, all of them are treated separately, and that is where the integration is required. Just for example, today, every company is having a few credit experts to handle the default related risks. Mortgage specialists are there to handle prepayment risk. So each thing is becoming a specialty center. There's nothing wrong in having it, but the communication between the departments is equally required. The traders are the guys who take care of market risk. Actuaries used to take care of the liability, mortality, and other insurance risks. Every company has an audit team which takes care of the operations risk, and probably the senior management look at the business risk. This is what all of you might agree. Every firm has all these specialists. If I look at a finance firm, I would see specialists in all these areas who are handling each of their department, each of their risks in isolation. But to what extent communication exists between them is creating a differentiator, is acting as a differentiator in the growth of the organization. If you handle them in isolation, what is observed is a suboptimal performance of the company. And because we would be overlooking the correlations, the interdependencies that could present between the various risks. And there is even a possibility of a portfolio effect, diversification benefit. Yes, there is a credit manager who is handling the credit risk, who has come out with mechanisms for handling the credit risk, and at the same time there is a market risk manager who is handling the market risk. Now, these two are handled in isolation. There is a cost that is incurred here, there is a cost that is incurred here, but because of the presence of these two, it might very well be possible by naturally they could offer a kind of a portfolio benefit between them. Now, if they are offering a portfolio benefit, why should I typically go for incurring too much of cost? By naturally they are offering as a portfolio, one is lessening the loss of the other. So the portfolio effects, portfolio benefits, I cannot take an advantage of. And in some cases, 1 plus 1 is not equal to 2. 1 plus 1 could become more than 2, which means that excess is ignored. In some cases, 1 plus 1 could become less than 2, which means I am not able to take the advantage of the portfolio diversification benefit. And that is what is ERM targeted towards. So just to talk about the ERM function which every organization has, it should have, is something which should come out with a firm-wide policies and standards with respect to risk identification, risk measurement, risk mitigation actions, risk monitoring. All the steps of risk management needs to be set with a clearly defined policies and standards. And across the firm, there should be a coordination and implementation of these standards for the across the organization, not for one department or business unit. There should be uniformity in the standards, because today what we see is for different risks we use different kinds of numbers. Probably the market risk team uses value at risk as a tool which measures the risk of their particular department. Whereas a credit risk department may talk in terms of outstanding balance rather than talking in terms of value at risk. Whereas the operations risk department might come out with their own scoring model saying this is a measure of operations risk. But look at it in a simple way. As an organization, what is required? As an organization, the consistency across the different forms of risk is very much required. Overall, what is the amount that I can lose? What is the money that is at risk for me? Right? So, and what is the kind of interdependency that is existing between the risks? If I have a different measure for both of them, probably the information which the senior management is getting as a part of the reporting is purely in bits and pieces, not a big picture. And at the same time, any senior manager in a firm who is getting this particular risk report, he should be comfortable in terms of addressing a few simple questions. What are the top 10 risks in my company? What are those critical business objectives which are at risk? Any of my objectives I'm going away from the target, any of my business objectives heavily at risk? And do I know what are my key risk indicators with which I can clearly benchmark myself, against which I can measure my performance on a regular basis? What are the limits? What are the trading limits I'm going to go with? And is there a way I can monitor whether I am exceeding the limit or within the limit? And can I take it for granted that my organization is complying with the overall laws, regulations, everything as far as the trading is concerned, the credit is concerned, the market investments are concerned, or whatever? So these are typically identified as the introductory aspects with respect to the initiation of the enterprise risk management process within the organization. Now, what is enterprise risk management? This is where a gray area is still existing. Different bodies have come out with a different, though similar but different kinds of definitions associated with the risk management. There is an organization called COSO. This is called as a COSO's definition of ERM, Committee of Sponsoring Organization of the Treadway Commission. But understand the gist of it. ERM is a process. It's not a tool. It's a process that is purely affected, implemented by the board of directors, management, and the other personnel. So it's something that is coming right from the top within the organization, applied in the strategy setting right at the top layer and across the enterprise with an objective. What is the main thing? Identify the potential events that may affect the entity and manage the risk. So identify all the possible events that are going to affect the company, manage the risk to be within its appetite. First define what is your appetite, then manage the risk within the appetite to provide reasonable assurance. What is the need for implementing ERM? We have to come out with a reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of the objectives. So simple way you look at all the things integrated, every company has its own set of objectives and goals, right? Now, company keeps doing a lot of things to achieve its objectives and goals. Now, there could be cases where there could be a deviation from this objectives and goals. Now, what this enterprise risk management is simply saying is identify all the events that could impact, that could create this, all potential events that could create this deviation, and try to come out with the mechanism so that even if the deviation comes up at any point in time, it is very much within the limits. Set the appetite and try to track it in such a way that it is very much within the limit. A very straightforward process, right? So that is what is the enterprise risk management bringing together as a picture. And International Organization of the Standards, which is clearly talking about risk is the effect of uncertainty. Agreed? Whatever are the objectives and goals that an organization is having, there is a deviation, there is an uncertainty of those objectives. And what we are saying is wherever we are not able to meet them, wherever there is a difficulty in meeting them, that is what we are bringing as a risk. And risk management refers to the coordinated activities to direct and control the organization with regard to that particular risk. So any uncertainty that is going to come up, how well I can address that uncertainty across the organization, a simple definition being provided by the International Organization of Standardization. And one of The famous writers in risk management, authors in risk management, James Lamb, came out with risk is a variable that causes deviation from an expected outcome. So I'm expecting that I should generate this much of revenues. So there is some kind of a deviation from the expected outcome, and ERM is purely a comprehensive and an integrated framework for managing the key risks so that I can achieve my business objectives. I can minimize my unexpected earning volatility and maximize the value of the firm. He is talking about the real core business objectives. Now I have an objective. Any deviation from the objective, that is what I am calling as risk. And when I am talking about ERM, come out with a set of processes, come out with a framework across the organization in such a way that my business objectives are not deviated too much. Even though there is a deviation, it is minimized. So my earning volatility, which is nothing but the fluctuation in the profits, is much lesser. Profits are good enough, but they are not volatile. Consistency in the profit, which is going to maximize the value of the firm. Now, what we could clearly see is, though the definitions are different, the overall essence remains to be the same. No single ERM definition is perfectly applicable to all organizations. So every organization should typically evaluate which definition suits to their business requirement better in terms of the scope as well as their complexity, and go ahead implementing it. Now, whenever any organization is planning to come out with an enterprise risk management framework, a few integrations across the organization are required. The overall organization should become an integrated risk organization, which means there should be a centralized risk management unit. So there should be a department at head office level, which is the centralized risk management unit, which would be reporting to the CEO as well as to the board. There could be a dotted line relationship between the risk management and the board. There could be a solid line relationship with respect to the CEO, which means it's a completely different department, different career path, different track altogether, which is looking after all the departments of the organization from a risk management perspective. So there is a position called CRO, which can be created, Chief Risk Officer, who would be heading that particular department, overseeing all the aspects of the risk. One thing for an organization which is going to implement effective enterprise risk management, even the risk transfer strategies need to be integrated. It can't be a silo based approach. So probably one department doing the risk transfer through insurance, another department doing the risk transfer through derivatives. Of course, if required, there can be a combination of the tools, but for the same thing, there can be a mechanism that both the two different departments using two different mechanisms, and none of them is aware of what the other is using. So the risk transfer strategies cannot work in a silo based approach because it does not incorporate the diversification across the different types of risk, which could result in going for an overhedged scenario, because I'm by natural, whatever is the portfolio benefit that is coming out with these risks, that is not being exploited. So results in overhedging, and insurance cover goes more and more excess. So very important thing, if the enterprise risk management needs to be put in place, overall it should be looked at from a portfolio perspective only. The risk cannot be looked at as an isolated solo units. It has to be looked at as an one single integrated portfolio perspective, so that the better use of derivatives, insurance, and if at all any other alternative risk transfer products are there, all of them can be visualized, can be optimized in terms of usage. Because the whatever is the natural portfolio diversification that these risks are bringing in, only the residual risk can very well be handled through any of these risk transfer strategies. That is what will benefit the organization multifold as it keeps doing this process over and over across the time. And the third major thing which the organizations need to change is the need to integrate the risk management into the business process. It's not the job of one single department in the organization. It has to be into the culture of the organization. It has to be into the blood of the organization. That is what will optimize the business performance. It can be looked at as when someone from the risk management department walks up, he can't be looked at as a person who is going to control the business growth. It has to be looked at as something which is optimizing the business performance, not controlling the business performance. Only when that information goes inside, only when that culture gets inside, that is what would create an effective risk management organization. So three key things which needs to be looked at if at all enterprise risk management needs to be successful in an organization. There should be an integrated risk organization. The risk transfer strategies need to be incorporated and integrated, and at the same time, the risk management needs to be integrated into the business process. It should not be looked at as a job of one single isolated specified department. And of course, we need to understand the fact that it's not overnight. The results can be seen overnight. It is a multi-year initiative. The senior management should keep sponsoring for implementing various ERM projects across the years, and let's all accept the fact that it is not revenue generating. Direct revenue generating department, product department is a direct revenue generating department, but risk management department is never a revenue generating department. But it's a cost center because there has to be a constant cost that has to go into it. And that is where the senior management really need to have an attitude with a positive bent of mind that it is definitely going to show results in the future. So there needs to be a sustained investment on a regular basis in terms of both human capital, getting the effective resources, along with the technological resources. And this has to be the same for any kind of an organization. Even if you are a number one player in your industry, the only difference probably might be you might be making a rational investment with a good amount of learning behind you. The investments could be done on a rational basis, proactive approach to risk, and overall you are optimizing your risk profile. But at the same time, if I'm looking at a smaller organization, yes, proper planning in terms of implementation of the tools may not happen. So there could be a disconnected investment in tool 1 and tool 2 which are duplicating each other. These kind of excessive investments could be there. They might not be proactive, they might very well be reactive. They are trying to fight one crisis after the other. That's the major differentiator, but at the end, every organization has to go with if it has to go with the implementation of the ERM, it has to look at the integration of these three components very successfully into the organization culture. Now, just looking at what are the key benefits which ERM is going to bring out to your organization? Yes, definitely it is going to turn out into an effectiveness across the organization. Because yes, there is a chief risk officer who is overseeing the entire ERM function. He is going to come out with the entire function, the roles, responsibilities, policies, standards, everything. And because it is driven right from the top, The plan of the CRO is getting percolated right from the top across the organization, makes the various functions work cohesively and effectively, because there is one person who is not biased towards any department or a project. It's an independent role. So this is where all projects, all departments of the organization work cohesively and effectively, and there is a good amount of communication that can come out. Interdependencies between the different forms of risk can very well be addressed, and the company can overall benefit right from communication improvement to the organizational effectiveness in terms of performance, profitability, lot of stuff. Cost effectiveness, all these things are coming up. And whatever the reporting that is being done, it is timely and relevant, because whatever the silo based reporting, market risk department will produce a 100 paper report, the credit risk department 1000 pages report. Reports keep coming out in pages and pages, but they are all silo based, and at the end, when the senior manager sits on these two reports, it might very well be coming out that these reports are inconsistent and contradictory, because one has not communicated with the other. So the ERM, what it can clearly look at is what should be the reporting across the organization. That is what a CEO is interested in. That is what a CFO is interested in. He is not interested in one single department. He wants the big picture. So the ERM really targets towards that. Enterprise wise perspective can come out in terms of aggregating the losses, whether any portfolio diversification benefits are there, exceptions, anything existing, risk incidents, not project level but organization level, what are the key exposures, all these things can be identified and reported at an enterprise level, not at a silo business unit level. And even a risk dashboard kind of thing can be prepared and be projected to the top management, which could increase the risk transparency, one across the departments, two across the business units, three across the various types of risk as well, overall resulting in an improvement in the business performance. From a bank's perspective, yes, capital allocation becomes more and more effective. Product development becomes more and more effective. Pricing becomes effective. Mergers and acquisition activities become effective. All these, they can reduce the cost, they can improve the revenues. What else? Directly, they are not contributing, but by implementing these things, where there is a significant amount of cost saving that can come out as a part of your typical regular line business processes, which is obviously adding up to the overall profitability of the organization. Losses are going to reduce, volatility of the earnings is going to reduce, so costs are going to reduce, which is going to increase your earnings, and the confidence in the shareholders is going to increase, which is going to improve the shareholder value, and this allows the firm to take more and more profitable risks and try to just eliminate those that are not profitable. Eliminate means it can either transfer them, it can either avoid them, various other things it can do in case those risks are not going to add sense to the organization. But though we see there are so many benefits, we see that the management typically gets into this process only after a near miss. They don't understand it right from the beginning. They don't understand the need for it, because one, it's not a revenue center. Two, there is a huge investment that has to keep going into it again and again to get the best out of it. So the general common attitude is, after a near miss, any disaster that is just averted, or a competitor, some kind of a similar kind of a crisis, if it has occurred with the competitor or someone very close to their organization, it is when the management is typically realizing the need for enterprise risk management. So that kind of an attitude should change. Today, that is the most common attitude that is seen. And even from the board of directors perspective, they start questioning the effectiveness only when some kind of a scam comes out, some kind of inconsistency in the performance comes out. Majority of the times it looks as if the board is going with a reactive approach, whereas they have to be more and more proactive. So that is one more thing that requires some kind of a change. And majority of the times, the auditors, regulators first pinpoint, and after that only the company is coming out with the need for risk management. So all these drivers should change. Now risk management should get into the culture of the organization itself. In some cases, the influential stakeholders like shareholders, employees, rating agencies, there could be external pressure which might prompt the organization to come out with effective risk management, because if the earnings are very much volatile, shareholder may not be interested in continuing with the investment. Rating agencies, by looking at the volatility of the earnings of the company, they may get into the downgradation of the ratings. Analysts may not suggest any kind of a buy behavior on that particular security because the volatility is so high, where the predictions are becoming quite into dangerous zones. All these things will typically prompt an organization to get towards effective ERM practices within it. There are so many tools that are available. The value at risk adjusted return on capital. There are some instruments like credit derivatives, catastrophe bond. You find for different kinds of risk, different kinds of instruments are available in the capital market. So a proper understanding of different kinds of risks, how to really deal with them, how to transfer them, how to reduce them is becoming one of the needs of the day as far as the whole enterprise is concerned. And that is where the overall organization is coming out with a risk champion called as the chief risk officer. And just looking at the overall roles of this CRO, he is the one who is in charge of all aspects of risk. So he typically takes care of the credit risk, market risk, operations risk, insurance, portfolio management, risk policies, capital management, risk analytics, reporting, all these departments, audit, all these departments which are more and more linked up with the risk. All these things are under the control of the chief risk officer. So he is the one point responsibility for developing and implementing an effective enterprise risk management strategy across the organization. And what we typically see is, because of poor implementations of the risk management, we have seen the recent meltdowns in the financial services industry. So the recent 2007 debacle has really brought out the need for an integrated approach to the risk management. So if it is not implemented effectively now, it can be a very dangerous sign for the future of various companies. So the recent meltdowns have really increased the demand for comprehensive ERM framework. So as a chief risk manager, he should offer the overall leadership, vision and direction to the organization for the ERM. Come out with an integrated framework, develop the risk management policies within the organization, wherein the major thing is come out with a quantification of the overall appetite of the organization towards the risk. And for various kinds of investments, various kinds of business processes, come out with specific risk limits so that they can be tracked again, so that they can be monitored on a regular basis, and any deviations can be addressed out quite immediately before they actually burst out. So come out with a set of risk indicators, monitor them, report them to the senior management on a regular basis, and based on how you have allocated the risk to the various departments, because one, an organization limit, after that There would be separate targets that would be going to the different departments or the business units. So towards each of the business unit, come out with an economic capital, how much has to be allocated as a measure against the risk or as a backup against the risk. So allocate the economic capital to the various business activities and come out with an optimized company's risk portfolio. What is the appropriate combination of each of these risks the company can really get into? Come out with an optimized company's portfolio through various business activities and risk transfer strategies. Communicate this entire thing to the senior management as well as the key stakeholders, the shareholders, the analysts, the rating agencies, all these kinds of key stakeholders with respect to the company, and make sure that the systems, the data management applications are very strong enough that they produce, that they highlight any kind of discrepancy within a minimum time period so that action can be taken at the earliest without everything getting into a mess. So, looking at the CRO role today, there is a lot of demand going up. At least now, if I look at the industry, the job market, the CRO role, which has it has created a kind of advantage for the risk management profession. Today, we are seeing lots of people trying to go with financial risk manager certification that is being offered by GARP. They are trying to go for professional risk manager certification, which is being offered by PRMIA. All these are internationally recognized kind of certification programs exclusively targeted towards the risk management aspect itself. And the creation of this CRO role, it has really improvised the visibility of the organizational effectiveness. Yes, now I have the confidence. This company is more and more risk oriented rather than just profit, just profit. Yes, everyone wants a profit, but an assured profit, not an volatile profit, right? So the CRO role is typically improved the visibility and organizational effectiveness of that particular function. Lot of people are choosing it as a career path because there is a confidence among the risk professionals that we can even go to the level of some C level position. There could be a CXO level position that we can very well aspire. So there is a broader view of a risk and business management that is very much coming out, and that role is creating a lot of attractiveness among the budding professionals. There are even in some organizations, the CRO is typically becoming a good competitor to a CEO and a CFO position. So rather than being limited to a control function, the CRO is even getting into more and more strategic roles as well. The salaries are escalating, and there is a representation of a core competency which is getting critical to the success of the organization. All these are really creating an advantage to the role of CRO, and it is elevating the profession of the enterprise risk management, which is now a new domain that is getting created where people can develop their expertise and specialization. Right? Now, what are the typical skills that are required for aspiring this CRO position? CRO should have a good leadership skill because he should be able to recruit a team of dedicated risk management professionals. So he should be able to hire them, he should be able to retain very talented professionals, and at the same time he should be able to establish the overall vision with respect to enterprise risk management, which is very much a requirement. So leadership skills need to be a must with respect to the CRO. There should be plenty of evangelical skills because a lot of people in the organization, the moment you use the word risk management, they are very much skeptical about it, right? They always think that the risk management is more like a control function. They never visualize that risk management is more associated as an integrated unit which is contributing to the growth of the organization's performance. That culture did not come up, which means risk managers' evangelical skills should convert the skeptics into believers. They should really start believing that yes, risk management can really do the job for us, can really improve the profitability of our organization. So there should be a natural resistance. There is a natural resistance at this point within the organization. So the CRO should typically focus on overcoming this natural resistance which can come out from the various business units. He should also have the stewardship skills, wherein he should more and more take care of the safeguarding the financial reputation of the company, the financial assets. So he should not utilize them in such a way that it causes the reputation issues to the organization. The financial tools that he is using for risk management and risk addressing should not damage the reputation of the organization. Then he should have the relevant technical skills because right from he is the person who is heading the credit operations, market, strategic, all kinds of risk across the organization. So enough technical skills, any kind of new regulations, new policies coming into the world of any of these risk spaces, he need to upgrade himself. So he should have that enough technology based skills or technical skills so that he is updated on the recent advancements in the world of risk management. And finally, not the least, the consulting skills, because he should educate the board, senior management. There could be a lot of people in the board who have come the traditional line where the interest is in the profitability generation, taking more and more risks. So there should be a clear-cut consulting skill which should educate the senior management and the board about the implementation of a few risk management projects and how risk management is going to integrate into the organization culture. And he should also help the various business units to implement risk management successfully in their particular departments. So all these skills are very much anticipated out of a good CRO. And looking at the key components of the enterprise risk management, corporate governance, a very integrated part of ERM. Because corporate governance is more to do with the actions of the board and the senior management, which is primarily in the interest of the shareholders. So when I'm talking about in the interest of shareholders, yes, they are anticipating profits. They are anticipating a growth in the company, but not at the expense of heavy risk. They don't want risk. So generally, if you talk to any shareholder, the simple thing he says, I want to maximize the profit with the minimization of the risk. Now, if that's the kind of objective, yes, by taking more risk only, I can take more and more profit. But is there a way out where I can use the minimum of the risk possible to try to maximize the profit? That is where the corporate governance plays an important role in the implementation of ERM. It has to clearly ensure that the board and the management is coming out with the processes and controls towards the management of the risk, which will really benefit the shareholders, not the management and a few groups of the company. So extremely risk-taking projects may or may not be taken up by looking at how they really fit into the organizational culture. There are so many regulations that have come out in the recent decade or two. Out of them, SOX, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, primarily looking at bringing in accountability to the financial accounting information by the senior level managers itself. And if any of those things are violated, coming out with severe penalties for non-compliance of them. So if a company needs to have a good ERM in place, the corporate governance policies need to be very much sophisticated for that particular purpose. Then the next is the line management, who are the day-to-day production guys, who really needs to take in the culture of ERM. They really need to align the business strategy with the corporate risk policy, because the business strategy, the line management is the revenue generator on a regular basis. So it has to get aligned with the corporate risk policy when looking at new business opportunities. It's not that a drastic jump in the profit, probably with an extremely high amount of risk. That kind of projects may not be taken up at all. So every project, every new project that is taken up should be visualized not just from the perspective of the return increase, but also from the perspective of how much it is adding up to the overall risk of the organization. So look at how the expected losses are changing when a new project is being accepted. What is the cost that is associated with the risk capital? Is it more than the typical average profile of the organization or lesser than? So a risk adjusted mechanism is very much required. So the review process need to be very much transparent and efficient, so that the line managers, they really understand the project that they are bidding for, where does it fit into the overall organization's approach? Is it more risky than the typical projects of the company? Is it less riskier? Where does it really fit in? Right? So they really would be able to understand. In some cases, whatever the decision they are taken, they can take it up independently, whereas in some cases, for some kind of risk, because of the interdependency across the various departments in the organization, a corporate approval is very much required. Then the third important component, look at the portfolio perspective of the risk management. Anything as a portfolio, you look at the different kinds of risks, set the targets at a portfolio level, set the risk limit, the maximum amount of risk that can be taken up, set it up at an organization level, take into consideration the diversification benefits, the correlations that are existing between the different kinds of risks. All those things need to be clearly built in, and look at the optimal portfolio return, means optimal risk that the company can very well take. Look at the diversification benefits, any kind of natural hedges, the portfolio side, the natural hedge is getting created through a portfolio, because one risk may offset the other. The loss on one can be compensated by a gain in the other. If that's the case, why should we go for a risk transfer for both of them? They are offering natural hedges. So that is one dimension which really needs to be looked at. And the next thing is the risk transfer. The company should really look out for the cost of risk transfer, because yes, risk is getting reduced, but at a cost. So understand that the more we are able to lessen the cost, the higher it is contributing to the profit of the organization. So cost of the risk transfer, it should be lowered. Whatever are the undesirable risks, they can be transferred, because there are so many instruments that are there in the capital market. So identify the different kinds of instruments and transfer out the undesirable risk to the secondary market, because developing heavy concentration of the risk in one or two areas, on one side you can say I am a specialist in one or two areas, but the concentration of the risk in one or two areas can even prove to be dangerous if those one two areas are really not resulting into profitabilities. So you have to evaluate as a implementation of the risk management in the organization, a constant evaluation of the various derivative products, insurance products, hybrid products that are there. Evaluate them on a consistent basis. Identify those products which are fitting into the organization strategy. Increase the risk origination capacity and revenue without accumulating high concentrated risk. That is the major fundamental of the risk management. Increase the capacity and revenue without accumulating additional risk. So one important component of ERM. Then another important component comes out to be analytics. Do lots and lots of analysis on the data. You need to know how to capture the data, how to interpret the data, how to bring conclusions out of the data. Come out with the quantification of credit market operations risk on a regular basis. Evaluate them, see if they are making sense to the organization. Otherwise, come out with the modifications, develop models. That is what is the job of the risk analytics. Come out with the most cost effective way which can reduce the overall exposure to the risk. Use tools like use tools like value at risk, risk adjusted return on capital. Finally, the intention is improve the value to the shareholders. So probably set targets that NPV of the firm should go up. Enterprise value addition of the company needs to go up. Economic value add of the company needs to go up. So all these things really need to be dealt with respect to the risk analytics part. Then the data as well as technology resources form another major component because data is heavily available. But what kind of data is required? What kind of people and resources are required to analyze the data, handle the data? So there is a technological requirement, there is a data related requirement. So how do I aggregate the various data, market data, internal data, the aggregations of them, looking at what data I need to capture, transactional data, the position data, are they getting properly captured? Are the technology sufficient enough that some real-time data is captured for all these things? How often the data is added, pruned, all these things, the policy need to be very clearly set in place. Even the measurements of prices, volatilities, correlations, lots of data is required. So the quality of the data that is fed into the system, the authentications, all these things need to be taken into consideration. That is one more major aspect of effective ERM strategy. And finally, it is the stakeholder management where the focus need to be in terms of improving the transparency of the relationship with respect to the various stakeholders. So reporting to the stakeholders quite often, including the risk management policies as a part of the annual report. All these things bring a lot of transparency into the implementation of the risk management in the organization. So the entire strategy needs to provide an assurance that whatever are the most effective risk management strategies that are there, we are implementing them. Important aspect of the ERM. So finally, looking at what the board needs to do and what the senior managers need to do, if at all the firm has to go more successfully into the risk management space, is first of all develop a risk appetite for the organization. How much risk are we willing to take? There are various measures of risk. One can, as a simple measure, we can go with a standard deviation. There are more sophisticated measures like value at risk adjusted return on capital, lot of tools. So based in terms of various tools or in terms of various parameters, set out what is the risk appetite of the organization. Come out with risk policies, loss tolerance level, target debt rating. Even that could be a simple way to come out with your risk appetite. I want a credit rating. My credit rating should not fall below double A in the next 1 year with 99% confidence level. So this is way I can define my risk appetite. or I don't want a loss of more than 1 million in the next 1 year with 99% level of confidence. So the risk appetite and risk tolerance limits can very well be set in this particular format. And once it is done, ensure that the overall organization has the risk management skills, but in terms of people, in terms of technology and other resources. Make sure that the organization has the risk management skills, otherwise hire them. And risk absorption capability, whatever the risk appetite it has set, it is able to absorb the risk to that extent. It has the kind of ability to absorb that much of risk to typically support its business strategy. And so in line with that, come out with an organization structure, create a role like a CRO, see whom he has to report to, define the roles and responsibilities for the risk management team completely, including the CRO. Create a risk culture within the organization. Come out with the integrated frameworks, risk measurement, management, everything, one at a isolated silo level, two at an integrated organization level. Strategic risk, business risk, operations risk, any kind of financial risk, credit risk, market risk, all these things you look at not just at the silo level, but look at it how they play a role at an organization level. Then establish the risk assessment and the audit processes. Come out with a benchmark for the practices against which all these things can be measured. And bring about a change in the risk culture of the organization. Right from the top, right from the senior management, if they start believing that risk management is the attitude, because the typical incentive scheme is I will pay you if you generate more profit. You will get the benefit if the company generates a higher profit. Now that is what will lead to taking high risk. Rather than that, if we are able to reduce the volatility of the risk, we will pay you more bonuses. If that's the culture, if that's the attitude that comes up, obviously the risk management culture is getting into the organization's nerves. So set the tone right from the top, not just in words, but even in terms of actions, which will create some kind of commitment in the employees towards a risk culture. And even the incentivization, it should be driven based on effective risk management rather than rather than ineffective risk taking, to typically in search of generating abnormal profits. Provide appropriate opportunities for learning. Keep training programs which can educate people in terms of the risk management frameworks, the upgradation, the lessons learned from the previous problems, ongoing training and development. Come out with designing new programs which could inculcate that process of risk management into the minds of the organization. So that is how an enterprise risk management will become more and more successful in the organization in the coming time frame. All right.